Welcome to the Best Music Podcast, where we see behind the curtain and discover the hidden habits and success secrets of noteworthy music makers. I'm your host, Dan Spencer. This week's featured guest is Griff Peters. Nature has always been spiritual grounding for singer-songwriter and guitarist Griff Peters. A few years ago, when he was mired in a heart-wrenching personal struggle, Griff went out to the beach and sat down under a rock formation where he asked himself this question. If he was told he had a year to live, what would he do? The answer was simple: to make his solo debut album, Canyons and Waves, which is out now on Impropriety Records. It's a deep and sincere body of work, crafted by a skilled and experienced artist with a worthy message of hope within darkness. Griff says, "This is a long-awaited showing up for my own life as an artist. This music paints a picture of an inner knowing and a rekindling of hope when we feel lost." I can personally confirm that Griff is a musician's musician because I'm a musician and I dug the heck out of his album. But in addition to myself, there's musicians such as, let's see, John Mayer, Billie Myers, Bryan Beller, Storey, and Mike Keneally Band that Griff has played with. Tremendous names and also very creative and tremendous artists in and of themselves. Griff is the founder of Hilltop Frog Recording Studios and the indie label Impropriety Records. Now, outside of music, Griff enjoys exploring the deep spiritual aspects of nature, art photography, and the Zen practice of rock balancing. Griff's photography is intrinsically linked to the Canyons and Waves experience with his 24-page liner notes with breathtaking images featured as a visual compendium to the music on the deluxe 45 RPM, 180-gram double vinyl. The vinyl, CD, and digital downloads are all available at griffpeters.com/shop. That's GriffPeters.com/shop, and the links are in the audio show notes or in the video description if you are on YouTube. Griff, thanks so much for taking time out of your day and out of this busy release season to come chat with me.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
Griff, I have a question for you because you have such a tremendous zen and focus and in the momentness, not only in your being, but in your music. Can you tell me a little bit about how much sleep you need to get to feel your utmost in terms of creativity and creative output?
How much sleep do I need to get?
Yeah.
If I get a good solid 8 hours, I think I should be good. Yeah. If I push really hard and kind of going overboard, sometimes just stopping for maybe 15 or 20 minutes during the day just to power down. I tell myself I don't have to think about anything for 15 minutes. And then that allows me to kind of organize my brain.
How do you use mindfulness and meditation to impact creativity?
I think that it's nice to claim sovereignty and control and ownership of our mind, our being, our thought, our presence, rather than acquiesce to constant noise and the forces that would have our complete attention all the time. People want to basically get our attention. Our mind, our awareness is a huge commodity, and people would have it if you will give it to them. Not just like a nefarious, scheme, but just noise of life, things that are going on, your to-do list, whatever it might be. And then you find yourself like, wow, I've gone through the whole day, and I haven't really just gone. So when you practice that, you are exercising a muscle just like anything else. And then it becomes quicker, easier to kind of transcend whatever stress you're dealing with and come back and focus again. Now that could be like communicating with somebody, or it could be like you're on stage and you're playing and you have to be present. You really need to be present. You need to listen. Or if you're recording or composing, you might have an idea coming through. As a musician, relevant to this discussion, it's really important to train one's mind to listen. Very much into listening, because I've seen that a lot of players, as they're on their practicing journey on whatever instrument, they're so much into the player. You're learning your craft, whatever it might be. And I'll have some people like come on stage and guest or whatever, and you can tell that they've done their practicing to a certain level, but they haven't had the experience listening. They're kind of tunnel vision. So the meditation is definitely a good way to open up your awareness. And I do find too that like being outside and being in like what we call wide angle vision and being aware of what's around us is a really good counterpart to the modern way of living, where we're kind of doing this a lot, like tunnel vision. This is a good, healthy like vitamin.
Griff, when you're talking about people coming on stage and you noticing that they're not listening, they're not present in that same way, is a lot of that coming down to the sort of body language of it's this and they're in their music like this, as opposed to this and then looking around and that sort of visual communication, that openness, or is it something else that's cluing you into that?
I think it's mostly the sounds that are coming from them. Although for the audience, especially, and especially if it's like if it's a video document or whatever. But let's say you're in the audience and you're sitting there in person, you're seeing that person. There's a palpable energy from this to this.
Mm.
Now, not to like be derogatory about, say, people that are introverted or doing the shoegazing on person, or there's some even famous artists that they turn their back, and I'm like, cool, you keep turning your back. If that's your thing, go nuts. It was kind of the people that I'm fortunate enough to play with nowadays. I kind of like, if you take, for example, I'm just going to throw out an example of one of the epitomes of this concept, like Mike Keneally. He's got like almost like he's got a third hemisphere of his brain that's always listening all the time, no matter how amazing he's actually putting out. He's always completely listening. It's scary. So using that as an example, if you see him on stage, just listen and learn, really.
Yeah, he wears a wizard hat sometimes on stage, and I think it is well warranted, because he's a bit of a musical wizard.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Griff, how do you find that exercise impacts creativity and music?
Oh, well, it's nice to get the energy of our body flowing, whether it's something like aerobic or whether it's yoga. I like to do stuff like out in the yard or out on a hike or whatever, and for me that's the best of both worlds. It's being in a kind of a restorative environment and hiking up in the hills and stuff, or like going to the beach, getting your bare feet on the ground. For me, that's a huge thing. And because as musicians, recording, touring, playing, you're indoors a lot. You're going from a plane to some kind of car into the building, and then you wait, and all that. So I try to get out and get sunlight and move, and really try to get away from the I don't know what might be a comparatively artificial environment, and then sweat, sunlight. Exertion. I'm not much for the gym or whatever, but if that's your thing, then rock out. That's my way of doing things.
Griff, it's so easy to talk to you, and you have such a calming presence. What is your number one tip for people who want to be collaborators?
For people who want to be collaborators. With me or with anyone in general?
With anyone in general, like people who want to, let's say there's someone in their goal is to play with a very well-known artist. Maybe they themselves don't want to become that artist, but maybe their goal is to be the ultimate collaborator. Like a Leland Sklar, I think would be an example.
Yeah. Well, there's a kind of a blend of skilled versatility, being a team player and seeing like, hey, what can I bring to the larger picture? How can I make the subject of a photo completely gorgeous rather than crowd it with maybe things that might be nice on their own, but maybe they're not appropriate in the big picture. I'm really into in photography or visual art, there's such thing as negative space, or in audio terms, it would be silence or space, in a mix or whatever. And having somebody who's versatile and listening, like we said a moment ago, who knows when to hang back and then deliver that cool thing at the right time, the seasoning in the ears. But also, I want somebody who's really themselves. I want that person to do what only they can do, because that's an honor and a privilege to allow someone to bring out their individuality and their art and their expression. I mean, the highest form of music and art is someone who's doing just their thing, And so it's a combination of listening and being a team player, but bringing their version of that, if that makes sense.
It does. Griff, what would your number one sort of tactical advice, like boots on the ground advice, be for being a team player? Like, do you have some rules or some best practices you've found over the years for being a team player?
Yes, that's a good question. I've been in a number of bands over many years, and one of the first bands that I was in, I was about maybe 13, and I played trumpet at the time, and it was a pretty big jazz band, and I was the new guy. My older brother was in the band, and my older friends and so forth, and I had a feeling that I had promise and so forth. I'd already played keyboards and stuff, and I had a musical family and so forth. So I showed up, and the first day of rehearsal, I chimed in on something, and the band director, he just kind of put his baton down on the music stand, and he looked right at me and he said, "The new guy should keep his mouth shut." And then everybody just kind of turned, and it's really true. It's very true. When you're new, just listen, just figure out how things are being done and how you fit in. And once you have something to say based on your perceptions and your effort and presence of how things are going, then chime in, and then it will actually mean something. But if you walk on the tour bus and say, "Hey, does this tour bus have a microwave?" Well, go look for yourself, dude. Maybe that guy is working on, or that lady is working on an amazing lyric, or maybe she's trying to craft an apology to somebody that she misses from her childhood. You know what I mean? People's attention is important. Don't just ask people to give you rudimentary stuff because you're lazy and unaware. Prove yourself, be quiet, and then that's the person that has weight to their words and their actions after they've gotten settled.
I think that applies equally to playing and coming into a new scenario as well. It's a one-to-one comparison, and that goes back to your point of listening. Really, Yeah. And then the experience, like you talked about, is knowing when you have something to say and when it's the right time to say something in those scenarios. That's huge. That's huge, Griff. Griff, how do you define success in music for yourself?
I think for me, it's a feeling of hearing that music back that you painstakingly crafted, and it has a palpable, like, yes, that feels right to me, instead of who signed off on that, and that kind of leads me to the need to be involved in more of the creative process, not just the composing, the arranging, but also the recording, mixing, and all the audio geekery, the mics and what I'm plugging into this, and there's all this tweakery that takes lots of time and money to do, but then when you hear it at the end, it's like, yeah, that's a righteous Phat sound. It's like eating something that you made yourself over a campfire, out under the stars, rather than a hurried microwave dinner when you're, on the phone or something. It's totally different. So it's a satisfaction on an artistic level. So that's success just internally, but it is not like, okay, I'm going to give you an external example that happened yesterday. I was at the post office mailing out boxes of the vinyl record and the CDs. And I was kind of that guy at the post office that was holding up the line, because instead of just a letter, it was like all this stuff, And the phone rang, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be that guy times 2 talking on the phone. And I thought, well, I'm just going to see who it is. And then, but it was my former band leader. Her name's Annika Paris, and she's super talented. And I played in her band, and she's amazing. She said, I just got your vinyl record, and it's so awesome that my husband and I are going to get a turntable to play your record. I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want to have happen. Converting the people one listener at a time. So to me, that's success, where it's like, I feel like I'm making a little bit of a difference, maybe. Not that I have to affect others too much. That's not my primary motivation. It's mostly, my own healing and expression. But those are 2 good examples of success. Yeah.
Griff, how do you know when a song is done?
Sometimes you don't. And there's a certain amount of faith involved, that when life pushes some other things into your path that you kind of need to deal with. It might be a new song coming in, or it might be that you've got to go out of town, or that person that you were going to have come in and play on it is no longer available, or I don't know. Or maybe you get to a point of diminishing returns, and you're kind of, am I doing demo-itis, where I'm addicted to this one sound or riff, and I'm trying to redo something. I think, though, in this case, when I got a mix back, I didn't do the mixing or the mastering on the record. I sent the mixes, the mastering, to other people. So when I'd get a mix back, I'd play it in the studio, I'd play it at home, I'd play it in the ear pods, I'd play it in the car. I have a little outdoor speaker thing. And if it wouldn't bug me to death, then it's like, okay, let's move on. Yeah.
If it didn't bug you to death.
Well, there are certain things that's like, that's unacceptable.
Yes.
Like for example, when we got I think it was vinyl test pressing number 2, there was a weird noise on that test pressing. And it was a strange, what I call it was like a fluttery, hashing ugliness that happened in the right channel on the loudest treble kind of stuff, like cymbals and high vocals and stuff. It's like something's wrong, and nobody else heard it. And but it came, it finally, people heard it finally, but it took a while, and I was like, no, I can't accept this. And finally, the mastering engineers, they found it, and we all fixed it. But it's like, all this stuff we're talking about, it's a personal thing, I mean, is there some weird secret like sound or quality police out there that's going to come and haul you away if you don't do good enough? this is the judge, this is the authority. And if somebody says, hey, I need a certain this or that, then yeah, go nuts. Yeah, if that makes sense.
It does. I think we do best not to speak ill of the quality police, because they're always listening, and you never know when they might show up. Griff, do you think of yourself as a musician, like your identity? Do you think of yourself as a musician, a human who creates music, or something else?
I think a musician has always been a part of who I am. I can't really imagine not being one. It's always been in my world, even as a little kid. Like in the vinyl record, the artwork, there's pictures of me as just a little tiny kid playing music or having music played to me by my family. So I do have an identity strongly with that, but it's not like it's the only thing that I do. I have a balance of being a family man. I have 2 boys and a wife, and I have a home, and I like to be in the community and being of service. I've spent a fair amount of my life teaching, whether it's music or nature skills or volunteering at the school and stuff. And now I've been doing more of like visual arts, like going to the beach or the mountains and taking like really like weird pictures of rock towers and stuff, things that look impossible, So I guess I'm an artist, in a wider sense. Yeah, but I do like to have that art have a healing intent. That's key.
Griff, you've achieved so much in terms of collaborations, in terms of this project, in terms of making it this far in life, right? What's your number one piece of advice for people to achieve goals? Do we all need to sit down and create a deadline for ourselves and ask ourselves, if we were to die in a year, what would we do? Do we need to do that every day, or what do you think?
I read an interesting quote just the other day about somebody who was asked a very similar question that you just posed. And he had something really interesting, and it was something like, it's good to remember that we must die. And having that, owning that, let's get on with it. Let's get away from the things that take us to a place that maybe we don't want to go. Do we want to poison ourselves with substances for year after year after year? If that's what you want to do, then hey, that's your choice. We all have a choice. But that choice becomes a little more poignant, actually a lot more poignant, when you realize that we have a certain amount of time. And so then make use of that time and take responsibility for your life and choose to be someone who chooses rather than always reacting and blaming. Not to turn this into like a psychology course, but it's like our beliefs, our attitudes, our opinions is really creates this energy that we operate in. If we can have that be clear and uplifting and whatnot, we can accomplish a higher mission. And I think the more noble, purposeful mission is to create uniquely with the intent of healing and service, to help one another. When you realize, like, hey, I'm connected to you, and we're here for each other, and we're here in this life to learn. So I'm getting my act together, and really a part of this album is it's a sharing of how I've moved from like an area of kind of like kind of really painful place to another area here where I'm grateful and happy and more energized and kind of a newfound power. And that 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 journey is valuable to me, and I'm hoping that it will be valuable to others. So that's the driving force for the record.
I think it's a tremendously valuable point. And with the record, I can tell you for myself, just having listened to, I think I listened to the first 6 songs is what you sent me to check out. And just listening to that, just the message and the presence and the moment really brings things into focus. Not in a way where you have to be morbid and be like, yeah, okay, if I were, there's focusing on death and then there's realizing you're going to die, right? And those are two very different things, because when you realize you die, you focus on life, right? And I think, yeah, there's the healing, the journey, the pushing us forward. I'm not being very clear, but there's just a lot of feelings, a lot of feelings from your music, man. Yeah. The message.
Thank you. Well,
and some Phat sounds, like really some nice Phat sounds.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to have a new blend of like healing music, but comes from a rootsy blues rock perspective that I grew up on, like listening to, say, I don't know, old blues records. Like my mom played old vinyl blues records like Howlin' Wolf and Buddy Waters and Sly and the Family Stone. Those grooves are in my mind, and then the first record I ever bought with my own money was Led Zeppelin 1, and just like I couldn't even believe how rad it was. Like, wow. And so that's in my blood, and so when I want to really deliver the most powerful message, that's the gear that I'm in, and I try to make that as gorgeous and deep as possible. For my own standards, but it's really nice when other people get it and appreciate it. That's makes me feel happy, and that kind of reminder, like other people dig it. I'm not all alone and weird.
Well, I can confirm you are not all alone, and we'll leave the weird for another time, shall we?
Yeah, let's do weird.
Let's do weird, man. Let's do it. Griff, you maintain a very high level of facility on the guitar, also the singing too. What do you feel is the number one piece of advice you have for people around practice over the long term? Like practice over a time horizon that's like a year, 2 years, 3 years, a decade.
Depending on your age and where you are in life, it can be really helpful to get yourself immersed in the best people possible. Let's say you're maybe college age or so. Let's say, you're or high school age or whatever. I find like a lot of people get really serious about learning their musical instrument when they're in their like mid to late teens, late high school, early college. So taking that as an example for a minute, life is relatively simple, being that you don't have 10 kids and a mortgage and stuff, so you might have some time to practice. If you can surround yourself with the best human beings that can inspire you and challenge you and motivate you, that's a huge success. I remember being in college where I would have a buddy. He and I would go down to the little practice cubicles where there'd be a little upright piano, and we're going to work on like solfeggio ear training to Bela Bartok songs. So we'd, pass a test and so forth. And we might not have individually done that if we hadn't said, hey, come on, Craig, we're going to do this, right? And so having that camaraderie, that's huge. And it also gets you into the early habit of listening and not being so much like you're just sitting on your bed on your own. I mean, put in your time doing that for sure. Like, listen to that record again and rewind like 1/10 of a second and what's that chord and write that down and so forth. Do that for sure, but I would recommend against being too much of a hermit and get out there in the world and be working on your skills of interacting and listening in real time. That's a good skill to have early on. I was lucky to do that though myself. I was always playing and performing for people, so I got through that kind of stage fright early, or that I don't know, the insecure ego, like, oh my gosh, the butterflies in your stomach and the dry mouth. I kind of got over that kind of early. And so that's good to work on. There's a whole bunch of other things. Gosh, what else can I tell you about that?
Sure. Well, I think I would just add one tangential point to what you just said, which is that in addition to surrounding yourself with positive people, having the accountability of the other person that you're showing up with and having that accountability buddy relationship with one person or many people can really make a huge difference regardless of what you're trying to do in life. Anytime you have external accountability, it can be a huge driver, because I don't know if any of you watching or listening to this, or Griff, if you've ever woken up in a warm bed and it's been cold outside, but there's significant mental effort that goes into shutting down the I'm just going to stay warm here in bed and getting up out of bed. And like that's the resistance, right? And it's like overcoming that mental resistance to whatever it is you're doing, anything you can do to diminish that resistance, and having those people around you is definitely a huge part of that. So Griff, you talked about a practice advice for someone who's early in their career. They're getting really intense about practicing, maybe doing those, 4 to 12 hour days. What about someone who is, let's say, didn't go to school for music? They're in their, let's say, 40s or 50s. They've always wanted to pick up an instrument. They've dabbled along the way. They sort of have a couple skills. They can maybe play a pentatonic scale here. They can do a couple bar chords there. What would your advice be for that person?
Make sure you're enjoying it. Otherwise, why bother? Be happy about it and enjoy the process, and be grateful that you have an instrument and you're expressing yourself and doing that. If you're not psychopathically motivated to be like, I need to be the most amazing in the world, and I'm going to go and live in a cave since I'm 2 years old and be the next, music Jedi or something. If that's not your scene, then relax, have fun, enjoy the music, and find a way to eventually play it for people. Let's say you're 50 and you're mostly working or playing in your house or something for yourself. Find somebody in the community, whether it's online or the music store or whatever, and say, hey, would you do me a favor? Would you get back to me in, say, a week and say, remember I told you a week ago that I was going to play you this thing in tempo with no mistakes with a metronome? Could you bug me about that again? Because otherwise I might flake. And then you have that kind of buddy system, It doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter how old you are. I think that would be a big bonus.
For sure. What's the one mistake you've learned to avoid when it comes to practicing? The number one mistake. Sorry, I didn't put the number one qualifier in front of it. I apologize.
I think sometimes we can try to just play the things that we already know and do the things that we're already good at and be like, oh, okay, I'm pretty good. When I went off to school, I was maybe this good at some things. But then later on, let's say a year or two later, I felt like maybe I was only this good at anything, but it was a much wider field of things instead of having a little narrow peak of ability. So if you want to be maybe a little more well-versed, well-rounded, don't spend too much time in your comfort zone. And I think that's where other people come in too, because if you around the right people that might maybe challenge you without like beating you up about it too much about it, because we are kind of tender and like it can be a vulnerable place to perform and to try, especially when you're new. So if you can kind of get out of that comfort zone and try new things at first safely, and then get a little more daring, trying stuff, like maybe I want to learn my modes, or maybe I want to learn my arpeggios, or maybe I want to work with metronome, or I want to learn the basics of, say, drum programming, or I want to learn my chords on keyboard. And that way, when you get into a group of people, you can speak the language, A lot of, say, if you're a guitar player, you might not be able to speak drum language, but that would be wise to learn, right? So there's so many things, just enjoy that comfort zone for a while and impress yourself, do your thing, and then find what else you need to cover.
Griff, what's your number one piece of advice for people who want to compose music or write songs?
Boy, that's a tough one. To live your life and have something to write about and compose about. I guess that's really the deepest source of it. And immerse yourself in a music that just blows your mind because it's so inspiring. Go see live shows. Really dive deep into what you're listening and learn all about it. And why is this song that I am captivated by, why is it so amazing? Deconstruct stuff, learn the ingredients of it, ingest that, learn all these little particles of stuff. And then over time, when you are able to just break everything down to the molecular level, and it just goes into every cell of your body, in time, that process will reverse. It's just like language, the language that we're speaking right now. Are we really thinking about noun, verb, conjugating stuff, singular, plural, all those tools? If we want to, we can analyze that. But during our normal conversation, we don't do such things. It's just become automatic. It's no effort. Same thing. It's a language. It's a way of communicating. So learn your craft, get it down deep, and then have faith that it will reverse course and you can flow out in your own authentic way. And you'll surprise yourself, like, wow, did I really just do that?
And speaking from your personal journey, what's the number one mistake you've learned to avoid when it comes to writing songs or composing music?
Just not doing it at all, avoiding it, making excuses, and being distracted by other stuff. So I did really sit down with myself back in the summer of 2020, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And there was a bunch of other things on the table that I thought was important. I just forget it. I'm going to do my record. And that was something that maybe I could look back and say I should have done that earlier, but it was the time to do it. So I think just not showing up for it is a mistake. When you do show up for it, you're going to make quote unquote mistakes, but you're doing it. And you're going to learn by those mistakes. And what really is an expert except a person who's already made a bunch of mistakes? I mean, you're not paying an expert to come in because like they know everything. It's like, okay, he's not going to make all those mistakes over again. It's that simple. Just stay in, don't give up, show up and keep on. right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Griff, I have one more question for you today.
Mm-hmm.
What's the number one piece of advice or number one thing you've learned that you would love to share with anyone who's trying to get better at music, regardless of instrument or ear training or theory or songwriting?
It's a really, really special, precious gift to have music. I believe it's, if not the highest, like Frank Zappa says, music is the best. Hard to argue with that. It's really one of humanity's most beautiful creations. It can truly heal and transform and uplift so many people. I mean, you can travel all around the world and play a beautiful chord or a beautiful melody or note. It doesn't matter how old they are or if they speak what language or what, or rich or poor, young or old. There's a universal, transcendent healing quality to it. At that enjoyment of music, okay, nobody can take that away from you, okay? Now, if you're doing music so that other people like you or that you'll get, external validation, then okay, then just be aware that may or may not be there, or that will definitely change over time. Your own intrinsic enjoyment of music is an amazing gift, so appreciate that and have a lot of fun, and realize that so many people out there just wish that they could do that. How many times has somebody said to us, like, oh, I wish I could do that. I tried to play and then I quit, and I wish I hadn't quit, and da-da-da-da-da. For those who have not quit and who've really put in some time, realize that it's a really, really special privilege and honor and a gift. And so do it, enjoy it, share it, shine bright, put stuff out, be yourself, and realize that you won't know the effect or the full ripple resonance that your music or your life in general is going to have on the wider world. You're not going to know that, but it's going to touch somebody and it's going to boost somebody in ways that we'll never know, but just do it anyway because it's rad.
Ladies and gentlemen, Canyons and Waves, the debut album from Griff Peters, is out now. Griff highly recommends checking out the vinyl because this is the full experience with 24-page liner notes, breathtaking images featured as a visual compendium to the music on the deluxe. Let's get those technical details in there. 45 RPM, 180 gram. Ladies and gentlemen, this ain't no single vinyl. It's a double vinyl. You can check it out now at griffpeters.com/shop. Links are in the show notes if you're on audio, in the video description if you're on YouTube. Griff, thank you so much for taking the time to come hang with me today and to chat.
My pleasure, Dan. Thank you, sir.